What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. I know the college football content has been a little slow, but with me trying to prepare everything for my internships this summer and with trying to get the rest of my schoolwork done before finals, it definitely has been a little slower than I would like it to be, but I assure you the college football content is still coming. Just taking me a little longer to get out than I wanted to, but I'm still here with my United Football League power rankings and predictions. Those of you that may be new to my channel are coming back to the channel after a long time. I've been talking about the UFL pretty much all spring. It's going to continue all the way until the league is done. And you know what? This is a spring league that has done really well. A lot of competitive games, a lot of very good teams, a lot of players emerging, and we're going to see some even better games this weekend. It's a loaded week 4 slate. I'm really excited to watch the UFL this weekend. Actually, I think there are a lot of very, very good games. But before we dive on into the power rankings and predictions, I just got to say thank you so much for the support on the channel. I say it every video. Continue to show your support, like, comment, share, watch my videos. That's a huge way that a lot of people don't realize it to help support the channel. And pretty much everything else you guys do does mean a lot to me. So if you guys are new here and you are interested in my UFL coverage, I power rate the teams 1 through 8, and then I predict all 4 games we will see in the UFL this upcoming weekend. Makes sense? Good. Let's go ahead and dive on into my number 1 ranked team, which if you've been paying attention to the UFL at all, it should really come as no surprise to the fact that Birmingham is still on top. Now, I don't really even know where to start or stop with this team because, in my personal opinion, there aren't enough good things to say about this team and how dominant they have been. The 27-14 victory on the road against Arlington was supposed to be a tough matchup. They handled that one. They didn't look great at times against Michigan, but they still were able to handle that. They put together their best, most complete performance last week in their first home game against Memphis, and this team just looks unstoppable. Adrian Martinez is starting to pull away in that quarterback battle as he got the majority of the playing time last week against Memphis. However, Matt Corral on the depth chart is back in that starting role. So Martinez, while he may slightly be pulling away, that true number 1 quarterback is still not set yet, right? So it still could be Matt Corral that emerges. Right now, Adrian Martinez looks to be that front runner, but again, still pick your poison there. I don't think Skip Holtz has decided how, or I should say, which quarterback is going to take the reins fully. Still going to use that 2 quarterback system to my knowledge. Maribel Person might be the best 1-2 running back combo in the entire league. You have a very good group of wide receivers: Deion Kane, Marlon Williams, Benjamin Victor. Jay Sternberger might be the league's best tight end. You have a defense that has 17 sacks on the year, which leads the league by a wide margin. A secondary that is phenomenal at making plays and breaking up passes. This team does everything. Offensively, they're on top in pretty much every statistical category. Defense, they're at very least top half in most of them. And if you maybe want to get a little nitpicky with this team, well, they still have a positive turnover margin because their defense, I believe, has forced 5 takeaways on the year so far. Their offense has given the ball away 4 times. So if you want to be a little, if you want to be scrutinizing of this team, their offense could do a better job of holding on to the football 4 giveaways on the year. But other than that, there's no question why Birmingham is here. Their most complete performance was last week. Can't wait to see what Birmingham does moving forward. Until someone beats this team, my apologies. Birmingham will remain the number 1 team in my power rankings. We'll move on now to talk about the St. Louis Battlehawks, who I have at number 2. This is an offense that is still firing after their 27-24 win, or I should say, after that stumbling performance against Michigan. It got going late, did the offense. It really started to come to life against Arlington, and it stayed lively during that game against San Antonio. This is going to be an offense that's going to be really, really hard to stop. A.J. McCarron still has not thrown an interception yet this year, has 616 yards and 5 touchdowns, likely going to be a candidate for the league's MVP if he keeps up this performance. Mateo Durant did not have as great of a performance in week 3 as he did in week 2. Still the team's leading rusher. Jacob Sailors is there as the team's second leading rusher now. You can't forget about Wayne Gallman still back there as well. He is not on my little stat sheet. And you have 3 100-yard receivers that are probably each going to get 500 yards this year. Marcel Aitman, Hakeem Butler, and Darius Shepard. Also, all of them over 10 catches. And guess what, Battlehawk fans? You get what going into the year was, or at least when you look at this roster, is your best receiver on the roster, and that's Ja'Cory Pearson. While he is going to be playing in a backup role, might see limited playing time, he is still back, and it gives a more dynamic feel to this offense. Now, defensively, the secondary has done a lot of very good things. This defensive front, while the linebackers have played pretty well, most notably in Willie Harvey and Callahan O'Reilly, this is the defensive front that has become a liability. They're able to get pressure at times, but the rush defense is a big liability. Their secondary doing good things. Their rush defense, if they end up getting into a shootout type mentality, especially again, the rush defense is what helped cost them against Michigan, as Wes Hills was able to run all over them. You face a team with a good running back, St. Louis could definitely be in some trouble, and they are dealing with injuries on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see how St. Louis handles that on the defensive side. But as long as this offense is firing as it is, there's no reason to think why St. Louis is one of, if not the top team in the XFL division, and one of the teams that can go ahead and challenge Birmingham. Now, they have a couple games before they play them, and yes, you have to go on the road to play Birmingham, that game there on May 11th, but this is still going to be a really fun Battlehawk team to watch down the stretch. As long as the offense is going as it has so far, St. Louis is going to be a contender for the UFL championship. They are at number 2. Now, 2 through 5 is where the power rankings can get a little dicey, in my opinion, because you can also start to factor in head-to-head and things like that. While it may seem like a head-to-head that's going to decide 3-4, I truly do believe that San Antonio does look like the third best team in the league right now. This team is absolutely dynamic. Chase Garbers is still playing really, really well at quarterback. There is one problem, though, with that. Chase Garbers got hurt, and it will not be Chase Garbers starting their game in week 4. I will tell you who that is once we get to the game preview and predictions. Anthony McFarland is also hurt. That's the team's leading rusher. So you're going to have to rely on John Lovett, who, granted, has performed well so far this year, but a new quarterback, a new running back one. You still have dynamic weapons at wide receiver, though. John Trey Kirkland, Marquez Stevenson, each have at least 15 catches and at least 150 yards. Both of them have touchdown catches on the year. Cody Latimer is a really reliable tight end target. And hey, the big storyline with him coming later. Again, fast forward to my game preview if you want. Actually, don't do that. Watch this video, but wait till the game preview for me to tell you about that. And this is the defense that can still make plays, especially Tavante Beckett and Jordan Williams. Those two linebackers have been flying all over the field. Each of them have 20-plus tackles this year. Jordan Mosley leads the team with 26 tackles. But there, again, are some more problems with this team. Third down is still a problem, right? They do not have a great third down offense, yet they have a fairly solid third down defense and discipline. Discipline is a big thing. I do believe that coming into the week, they're the most penalized team in the XFL, which has to change. That has to change. It helped really not allow them to get back into the game as fast as they wanted to against St. Louis. And moving forward, it's going to have to be something that improves fairly quickly, because when talking about San Antonio here, especially with the injuries to Chase Garbers, Anthony McFarland, and some of the guys on the defensive side of the ball as well, this is going to be a Brahmas team that's going to need to rely on their offensive firepower of their wideouts and going to need to rely on the dynamic ability of their linebackers to help carry them here. Interesting game coming up against Michigan this week. We will see what happens with that. Now, as I said, head-to-head is going to look like it is deciding 3 and 4, right? The difference for me is San Antonio is a team that I feel like has an identity. Now, that identity will be challenged when Chase Garbers and Anthony McFarland do not play this upcoming week. However, the team that I have at number 4, while they sit at 2 and 1, I don't believe that DC still has their full identity yet. Now, I say yet because while they were in front for most, if not, I believe, all of that game against Houston, it slipped away from them late. That game against Arlington, back and forth. DC had to use some of the unconventional rules of the XFL, at least in terms of if you watch the college game or the NFL, to come back, kick a game-winning field goal, and win that game. That was such a fun game this past weekend, helping them improve to 2 and 1. Now, Jordan Ta'amu is not a questionable piece of this offense. He is really, really good. 627 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. DC's going to rely on him to do a lot for this offense this year. He can even run the ball, has 80 yards on the ground when he scrambles and gets outside of the pocket, right? But this DC team is still trying to find a different identity. And while they have good wide receivers, Ty Scott, Kelvin Harmon, Chris Rowland, and others, as well as the tight end Bradley Moore McKinney, you have a lot of really good defensive pieces, especially in that defensive backfield, including that safety duo of Ramirez and Swearinger, Joseph and Johnson at the cornerback position. All those guys are really, really good. But this is a team that ran the ball really well last year, and they ran it with Abram Smith. And while he is still a member of the DC Defenders, he has been hurt and he has not been playing. You have to be able to find a new identity or reestablish that identity this season. With a game on the road against Birmingham coming up, not necessarily the best time to be able to have to figure out your identity, right? But Jordan Ta'amu is going to have to be the guy that's going to have to make plays for as long as Abram Smith is out. Now, Cameron Harris and Darius Higgins, they are guys that can get the job done. They are not as dynamic as Abram Smith, and if they are, they haven't shown it yet. So it's up to this DC team. Figure out what your identity is, especially offensively, because especially with that 3-game stretch coming up there, Birmingham, St. Louis, and San Antonio, while 2 of those 3 games are at home, those are my top 3 power rated teams in the league right now. Find your identity, get that ground game going. If Abram Smith comes back, that's great. I'm sure he'll fit into the offense really well. You can sort of reestablish that identity, but as long as he is out, rely on Jordan Ta'amu to make some plays. The run game is going to have to pick something up here and there, but allow Ta'amu to make plays with his arm, with his legs, and this defense, while it's sort of middle of the road in most, and it gets gashed for a ton of big plays, it needs to stay strong. It needs to bulk up. This is a huge, huge possible. I'm not necessarily going to say turning point, but a huge stretch in the DC schedule and possibly for the Defenders season. Right now, they're a team that absolutely can shape up pretty darn well to get into the UFL playoffs, but they're going to need to pick up some wins against St. Louis and San Antonio are those 2 big games that you need to watch. Obviously, this one coming up this week on the road against Birmingham as well. DC for me, number 4. We'll move on to number 5. It's the last 2-1 team in the league, and much like San Antonio, didn't really mention it much, but San Antonio being 2-1, kind of a surprise. Michigan being 2-1 is a much bigger surprise. Pretty much everyone coming into this league had them power rated 7th or 8th. There was just not a great history. They did not have a good record in the USFL during their 2 years of existence. And coming in, just not a lot of confidence was around this Michigan Panther team. There should be now. And EJ Perry, after, well, I mean, playing some solid football for the most part, is now really starting to find his stride. He was immaculate last week. I believe was 16 of 19 for over 200 yards, something like that. Added a couple touchdowns on the ground as well. So EJ Perry is really starting to find his stride. Wes Hills has cooled off. You need Wes Hills to be able to continue to have high levels of production because he possibly is the best running back in this entire league. And also, hey, it helps to have a wide receiver emerge. Marcus Sims has been that guy. A little bit banged up. It looks like he's going to be okay, ready to go. Thank goodness it is nothing serious, but 218 yards makes him the lead receiver in the UFL right now. 2 touchdowns. He is a big play threat for EJ Perry, and he has really helped this Michigan team be as good as they are offensively. Now, there are some things that can still improve from Michigan. And with the or I should say before I say that, with the physicality level of this Panther defense, they're going to be able to compete with anybody. This is a very physical team, especially up front. Frank Jinda, Noah Dawkins, Daniel Wise, Breland Speaks, and others are really good. And it's a secondary that, while it hasn't forced a ton of turnovers this year, Keith Gibson, Kai Nakua, 2 of them that have come away with picks. This is still a defensive back grouping that plays some really good football, but the line play needs to improve. This is where I'm going if you're going to have concerns about this team, of which there still are some, right? You want Wes Hills to be able to get back and start running a little bit better, much like he was able to do against St. Louis in week one. You still want not AJ, EJ Perry to play as well as he did last week. You still want Marcus Sims to be this big play threat, but you want that offensive line to start creating a little bit more push. EJ Perry, while he can run, can't run for his life, and you got to be able to open things up for Wes Hills. And you also need to be able to create some pushback on the opposing offensive line and create some pressure. Now, while Michigan has forced a lot of tackles for loss so far this season, they do allow some big plays. And the defensive line, I think, is a point to where while they're generating tackles for loss, they need to get better in terms of containing the quarterback, pressuring, things like that. So improve the line play, get Wes Hills going. Michigan's going to be just fine. Interesting game with San Antonio that I'll predict a little bit later coming up this week. Moving on into the team that I have at number 6. 6 and 7 for me are a real big toss-up, but I went with the Memphis Showboats at number 6. Case Cookus still continues to be a really, really good part of this team. What happened last week? You just ran into the best team in the league in the Birmingham Stallions. Really, at that point, you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, move on to the next one, right? You still can't have the bad taste of that San Antonio loss in your mouth. You have to be able to get that out and move on. Big road game coming up against St. Louis. If you're able to get your season to 2-2, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself, especially with your 2 wins coming on the road and an environment that's going to be really, really tough to play in next week at the Dome. Darius Victor is hurt. They're moving to Titus Swen, the former Wyoming Cowboy, at running back. He's been a good option out of the backfield for them, but he had a tough time getting it going last weekend in terms of a rushing capacity. What have I said all season long? Case Cookus has a very good group of wide receivers to work with. Jonathan Adams is still good. Dawood Davis, don't know if he's going to play this upcoming week. He's a little banged up, but he has a touchdown this year. Vinny Papel has 2 touchdown grabs. Sage Surratt is a really, really valuable tight end. I'm not worried about this passing attack at all. But Darius Victor couldn't really pick things up. So now with him hurt, well, they made the move to Titus Swen last week, and now with Darius Victor hurt, you're more, not necessarily forced, but you're going to have to go with, well, I guess you could say, you are forced to go with Titus Swen now that Darius Victor is hurt and is a little bit banged up. So for Titus Swen, you got to be able to get things going in a really good manner. You got to be able to give Case Cookus some help. And speaking about this defensive side, well, there are both good and bad things about this defense as well. The defensive front 7, much like Case Cookus can cook, they can really stir it up too. They generate pressure. They are very, very good at being able to force some turnovers. I mean, you look right there counting 1, 2, 3 forced fumbles. Maximilian Roberts, Greg Reeves, and Malik Lowell, all linebackers, each have forced 1. You even look at Kyrie Woods. He has forced a fumble this year as well. But this is a secondary that you want to see a little bit more production out of. I do believe that TJ Green is a name that may very well not be playing against St. Louis this week, which that's big. That is really, really big because TJ Green is a very valuable part of this secondary. You can even bring him off the edge as a rusher as well. So Kyrie Woods, Delrick Abrams, and some other names going to be guys that are going to have to step up. Christian McFarland as well may have to get into a bigger role. But overall for this Showboat team, not worried about the passing attack, not worried about the defensive front 7. I'd like to see more play out of the running backs and more production to give Case Cookus some help, meaning the offensive line is going to have to improve as well. I think that's another big part here. And the defensive backs, start generating some turnovers, start knocking balls away, don't get beat deep. And I think Memphis can definitely play their way back into trying to get into the postseason. So Memphis is here at number 6, meaning the 2 teams that are still winless are at 7 and 8. However, I have a ton of faith, and I mean a ton of faith in this Arlington Renegades team. Why? Let me explain. Statistically, analytically, whatever you want to say, there's no denying the offensive talent that is here. Luis Perez might very well be the best quarterback in this league. 737 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's only thrown 1 pick. He's a phenomenal talent. He's got a ton of wide receivers and a tight end that have really helped him. Tyler Vaughns is really starting to step it up from his play, or I should say, to get back to the level that he was playing at last year. He has 182 yards and 1 touchdown. He's up there for one of the leading receivers in the league. JP Payton is a very good option. Isaiah Winstead only has 3 catches, but 72 yards and a touchdown. Deontay Burnett is good. That tight end and Sal Cannella is a very, very reliable option. Louis Perez and company love to sling it all over the yard, and they have the run game to back it up. Lindsey Scott has 8 carries, 39 yards, 2 touchdowns. Davion Smith is really able to get it done here as well. This offense, I'm really not worried about at all. Maybe the only thing is the offensive line can step up at times and play a little bit better. Louis Perez can maybe create a little bit better outside of the pocket, but he does that well anyway. I'm not worried about this offense. The defense is what led this Arlington team last year. It was not their offense, but I mean, hey, you look, they've scored 24 points and 28 points back-to-back weeks and back-to-back losses at the final second. Back-to-back game-winning field goals for St. Louis and DC to help beat the Arlington Renegades. Otherwise, they're sitting at 2-1 or 1-2, depending on what would have happened in that St. Louis game. As had that kick missed, you probably end up going to overtime, and who knows what happens. But if that DC kick doesn't go through, or Arlington was able to make a little bit more of a defensive stand, they're sitting higher up in my power rankings, and they're sitting with a win in that column. Right now, you're still sitting with a goose egg, and the defense has to step up. Now, while I do think the defense needs some patience to really see their full potential, because I do think the stats can be a little bit skewed when you're talking about the Arlington Renegades. I mean, given the 3 offenses that they have played, Birmingham, St. Louis, and DC, even though DC doesn't have their identity running the football like they did last year, Jordan Ta'amu is still a very good quarterback. And again, we know the offensive potential that Birmingham has, and St. Louis might be the best offense in this league, maybe besides, again, that of Birmingham. Those are the 3 teams that you have played so far. You have a very, very, very manageable schedule, at least over these next 4 to 5 games coming up here for the Arlington Renegades. It starts with a game on the road against the other winless team, and by process of eliminations, the team that I have at number 8 in my power rankings. But guys on defense are going to need to step up. One name I'm really keen on watching, you should be too, especially if you are a Renegades fan, Vic Beasley. I want him to step up. I want him to start making some more plays. He has 2 sacks this year, but only 6 tackles. He needs to be a little bit more of a force in this defensive back room. Start creating some turnovers. You're knocking passes away. You're defending passes. Create some takeaways. I think this defense will show itself eventually, but it definitely still does not seem like it is as good as it was last year in a defense that really helped this Arlington team go win an XFL championship. I have faith, though. The offense is really good. They're going to keep them in games that the defense can step up and make a couple of plays. I mean, that's the difference between 2-1 and 0-3 in professional football, especially in the spring league. I have faith in Arlington moving forward. Watch out for the Renegades. They may be sitting at 7th, but I do think that this team has a ton of potential moving forward, especially with how manageable their schedule is, which leaves the Houston Roughnecks here at number 8. Houston does not have a lot of bright spots to talk about right now. This is an offense that doesn't necessarily have a ton of pulse. Reed Sinnett has come in and gave the passing game a little bit of life, and they have some guys that are able to make some catches there, right? Kirk Merritt, Emmanuel Butler really emerged last week. Kike Chisholm, Justin Hall, Braden Bowman, who's not here, is that tight end, used more as a blocking tight end, but hey, if need be, he can go out and catch the football as well. And you have some of the better defensive players in this league. Ethan Westbrook is a very disruptive defensive end. Reuben Foster is probably the best defender in this league. Corn Elder is tied for the league high and passes defended with 4. Your safety duo in Markel Roby, who really emerged last week, and Donald Rutledge has been pretty darn good. So this is a defense that, even though they gave up 34 points to Michigan last week, a lot of that due to their inability to stop the big play. This defense has really good talent. And again, Reuben Foster, probably the best defender in this league. He is an absolute dog, the former Alabama Crimson Tide and former national champion as well. Got to be able to limit those big plays, got to be able to slow teams down and limit what they're able to do on drives. And this offense, again, the run game doesn't really have a lot of life. Reed Sinnett is providing as much life into the passing game as he possibly can, but he needs help. And TJ Pledger hasn't been able to provide it, at least at a consistent basis. There's really no one else that is really there to help provide anything consistently to this roughneck team. I have good news for all of you fine people in Houston. Mark Thompson should be back. Has the potential to be one of the best running backs in this league. If he plays this week, which it is looking, I'll say 90% likely that he is going to play, there's going to be some life to this offense, and Reed Sinnett is going to have help. Mark Thompson is such a huge part of this offense. He's such a huge part of this offensive game plan, and when he is not there, it really limits what Houston is able to do. So I like Houston moving forward. Watch out for Mark Thompson. We'll see what the Roughnecks can do. This is a very interesting game against Arlington coming up this week. Okay, quick water break. And there are my power rankings for the UFL in week 4. We will now predict every game that will happen in order that they will take place in. We will start out with this one right here. The St. Louis Battlehawks are going to be hosting the Memphis Showboats. Again, home field advantage going to be a huge part of this game here. Part of the reason why St. Louis is as big of a favorite as they are. So what can the Showboats do to go on the road and be able to pull this one out and to have both of these teams end up with 2-2 records at the end of the day? Well, St. Louis has a lot of injuries that I talked about earlier. Didn't necessarily list any specific names, but they mainly are on the defensive side. Take advantage up front, meaning this offensive line. It needs to show improvement. This is the perfect opportunity to do so. A lot of great pass rushers here for St. Louis are going to be out or are going to be very limited. So this offensive front going to be able to create a little more pushback than usual, at least when you play this St. Louis team. And it is going to be a team who, again, moving to Titus Swen at running back now that Darius Victor is hurt. Big opportunity for him. Case Cookus and company are going to be fine throwing the ball, but the offensive line and the run game are going to be big parts here of this game. And getting pressure on A.J. McCarron is not optional at all. If you want to even have a chance at slowing down this St. Louis offense, you have to be in the face of A.J. McCarron. You have to be able to get him to make mistakes, which he has not made one this year. Well, okay, to be fair, he hasn't made one that has costed him a pick, right? You have to be able to, I'll say, even force some turnovers here. Getting pressure on A.J. McCarron is the start of the defensive game plan, but even when you get pressure, he's still got probably the best group of wide receivers in the league, and Ja'Cour Pearson is coming back. So can the defensive backs hold up? Can they limit that big play? Can they limit what St. Louis is able to do with the pass game? Huge question mark that I have with Memphis entering this game. For St. Louis, it's pretty much the opposite, right? Pretty darn simple. The run game has found its stride. At least it has started to, right? I think Mateo Durant really started to provide that in week 2. You had Jacob Sailors really come along in week 3. Week 1 was a lot of Wayne Gallman. So you have 3 viable options back there. And look, it is no mystery that A.J. McCarron and company can sling the rock. They're probably the most lethal passing attack in the league, and they're getting their best wide receiver back. Even though he's coming off the bench, he's listed a little deeper on the depth chart than you would have found him in really any preseason thing. Ja'Cour Pearson is going to be a guy that I expect to be heavily involved when he is on the field, because he truly is a guy that can do everything, and he is a really good player that I think is going to be really good for this Battlehawk team now that he is here and able to play. Win the battle at the line of scrimmage if you are St. Louis. This is an offensive front for Memphis that has really struggled at points this year. It's a defensive front that, while battling injuries, especially with your linebackers, can create some pushback. So generate some negative plays, be able to get pressure in the face of Case Cookus, and that's exactly what I think St. Louis will do. Mainly, I think this offense is just way too dynamic. Even with the injuries that St. Louis has, I don't believe that Memphis is going to be able to keep up offensively with this team, and I don't think their defense is going to do enough to slow down St. Louis, especially now that Ja'Cour Pearson is here. St. Louis is winning this one 31-21. You can find this one again, all lines and odds as of recording this video. 12:30 Eastern time on ABC. Should be a very interesting one, but I think the offensive firepower, especially through the air of St. Louis, is too much. Battlehawks beat the Showboats by 10. Moving on here, continuing with games on Saturday. Hey, for the first time ever, we're going to have two games going on at the exact same time here in the UFL, and this is one of them. 7 o'clock Eastern time on Saturday on Fox. It's the reigning two-time USFL champion Birmingham Stallions against the XFL runner-ups from last year, the DC Defenders. And, well, this is a very interesting game, right? It is not a mystery to see why Birmingham is favored by 9 here, right? As I said when I was talking about DC in my power rankings, we'll move to that bottom bullet point for DC. You have to be able to find your identity, right? Jordan Teamu is a really good quarterback, and he's going to be able to not necessarily have his way, but he's still going to be able to make plays even in this game against the Stallions team that is really, really good. But your offensive line has to create some more push, especially against the Birmingham team that already has 17 sacks this year. 17 sacks through 3 games is just absolutely crazy. That's an average of almost 6 sacks per game. The offensive line has to create pushback. It has to be strong, but look for the offensive balance, right? Jordan Teamu is going to throw the ball. He's going to run the ball as well, and even though Abram Smith is still not playing, that run game has to step up. It's the way you beat Birmingham, by staying balanced and sustaining your drives. Sustain your drives, and yeah, the defense is going to have a pretty tough task. They have to step up. They have to make some plays. That's a really tough ask when you play a team as talented as the Birmingham Stallions. And as I talked about with the power rankings, Corral is back as the starter, at least in terms of the depth chart. We know Skip Holtz likes to use both quarterbacks, so we'll see if Martinez continues that. If Martinez, my apologies, continues to sort of pull himself away as the true starting quarterback here. But Matt Corral is going to have another opportunity to prove that. If you are Birmingham, eliminate the ground game early. It has not been a thing that has worked for DC this year, and if you're able to get rid of it early, Jordan Teamu is going to have to elect to throw the ball, if not either be running for his life. It's going to make things really, really hard, if not almost impossible, for DC to be able to win this game. But as I talked about with DC in my power rankings, wrong place, wrong time. You cannot be a team that is lacking in identity against Birmingham, and it's going to show, and they are going to pay for it. Birmingham is just too good offensively. They're too good defensively. I think DC is going to score their points. I think some of that offensive balance will show up, in the run game will have more life than it has had in weeks past, but Birmingham's just going to be too talented offensively for DC to slow down on a consistent basis. Stallions win this one 35-24, remain undefeated in United Football League play. We'll move on to the other game that's going to be taking place at the same time. I think it depends on where you are locally in terms of what game you get on your local broadcast, because both games are on Fox. Both games are both games are happening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. So really excited to be watching 2 football games at once. Really for the first time since, you could argue, the NFL season. Yes, it is something I do. I watch at most maybe 4 or 5 games at a time. I'm a nerd. Deal with it. The Michigan Panthers and San Antonio Brahmas are going to be facing off this week. And as I talked about with the Panthers, EJ Perry really is starting to find his rhythm, yet at the same time, you want Perry to continue to find his rhythm, especially throwing the ball. He needs to have some pressure taken off of him. Wes Hills had a very, very good week 1. That's fantastic. He has not had a great week 2 or week 3. Up his production. He needs to start ripping off some of those big runs that we know Wes Hills can do. He was the leading rusher in the USFL last year. This is going to need to be a team that, while EJ Perry, yes, continue to find his rhythm, continue to find guys like Sims down the field, Wes Hills has got to take some pressure off of this team and get the Brahmas out of system. Look, and as I said, the Brahmas are dealing with some injuries right now. Chase Garbers, the starting quarterback, who has played fantastic, by the way, is out. You are not going to have Anthony McFarland in the backfield. Quentin Dormady is going to end up being that starting quarterback here. Get him out of system early, get pressure in his face. You do that, you have a pretty good shot here to win this game, especially with how physical Michigan is defensively. For the San Antonio Brahmas, though, with Chase Garbers out, it is Quentin Dormady time. The offensive line is going to have to hold up for him. They are going to have to play really, really well. And this is a San Antonio team that needs to get him in system really, really fast. If you can get Quentin Dormady in system and you can get him working early, especially with how talented this group of wide receivers are, grammar, that's going to be something that's going to benefit San Antonio really, really well, especially getting Latimer, that tight end, involved. You want to know why? Even though the Orlando Guardians in the XFL were not a great football team last year, Quentin Dormady and Cody Latimer were on that team. They now come over to play for San Antonio, and they still have some chemistry. Expect that to be a big time connection. I think Michigan's going to have trouble slowing that one down, but backfield pressure and locking down Sims are going to be big things here, right? Marcus Sims is a very good deep play threat, and with EJ Perry starting to find his rhythm, defensive backs are going to need to be watching him, and they do have some defensive back injuries that I am aware of as well. So time for that grouping to step up. But you also got to get pressure in the backfield, limit what Wes Hills is able to do, keep EJ Perry in the pocket, because we know that he can get outside the pocket and run as well. I think the Michigan Panthers are going to go ahead and win this game. With how physical both these teams are, or I'd say with how physical the Michigan Panther defense is, I think especially with Quentin Dormady being a first-time starting quarterback, at least in this league, he's going to be able to hit his shots. San Antonio's still going to have their moments. This is going to be a low-scoring affair that I think Michigan will win. Expect Wes Hills to really start to get going in this one as well. And I think Michigan will pull away. That physicality on defense is what does it for me. Michigan improves to 3-1, while San Antonio falls to 2-2. Although, hey, if Quentin Dormady and Cody Latimer are hitting deep bombs and Dormady is in a system, and they're not missing Anthony McFarland too much, could easily see the Brahmas pulling this one out. But I'll go ahead and throw my prediction at Michigan. Also, I've been picking against the Panthers all year long. About time I start rooting for them. Don't let me down, Panthers. 18-16. Michigan takes it against San Antonio. And you move on here to talk about the last game, the Arlington Renegades and the Houston Roughnecks. Even though both teams enter this one at 0-3, I think there is a clear favorite, and I'll talk about why. It's the Renegades. And it's because Louis Perez and company, I think, are going to have their way all game long. Literally all game long. This is the Houston team that, look, has really good pieces. Reuben Foster is a great, great defensive player. The secondary can be very disruptive, but they allow too many big plays, and they get gashed. Perez is going to take full advantage of that. They're going to be able to bounce Houston's defense around this way, that way, really any way that they want. But speaking of this roughneck defense, you have to be able to handle Houston's pressure. The offensive line has got to protect Louis Perez, give him time to throw, and the defensive line has to provide that pressure right back for a reason that I will talk about later that I already mentioned when I talked about both Arlington and Houston. It's a defense that has still yet to have their performances show up statistically. They've played probably the three best offenses in the league. The defense is going to have a high-stakes opportunity here to show and prove themselves that they are still, maybe not as good as last year, but they're still a force to be reckoned with. Can the defense slow anything down is my question mark for Arlington, especially because Reed Sinnett has provided a lot of good life to this passing offense, and while it isn't as dynamic as some of the other passing offenses you're going to find, it's still a solid enough attack, and Mark Thompson should, I can't emphasize that enough, he should be back. So find the run game. When Mark Thompson is in the lineup and he starts for this team, there really is no stopping this Houston run game. You can slow it down, sure, and that's what Arlington's going to try to do. And how healthy is Mark Thompson? Is he on a carry limit? Things like that are going to be interesting to watch. But as long as Mark Thompson is there, you have to be able to slow him down. Defense as a whole here may need to go berserk as well, because as I said, this is a defense that gets gashed too often. Create those negative plays, force those turnovers, get Arlington out of their offensive rhythm. And as long as Mark Thompson and company are going and sustaining drives, you're going to have yourself a pretty good day here if you are Houston, in my opinion. But it's time to refine that identity that has shaped the Roughnecks, right? Get this team running the ball, provide that pressure. I just don't think it is going to be enough. I think Mark Thompson coming back is a huge, huge boost to this team, but I do think the favorite here in Arlington will be able to pull this one out. As I said, I have a lot of faith in the Renegades. And while the defense still might have a tough time here and there, I believe that overall, this is an offense that'll be too dynamic for Houston, even with Mark Thompson back. Houston doesn't have the offensive potential, in my opinion at least, to be able to match it. I got Arlington winning this one 28-20. Again, this one on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern on FS1, playing in Houston, Texas. That's all I got for you here. Week 4 power rankings and predictions are done. Enjoy your UFL weekend. I promise the college football content is coming. I'm working on it. Got a lot of other stuff I'm trying to figure out too, though. Again, enjoy your UFL weekend. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. Continue to show support for the channel any way you can, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.